one of the things. Fashion was important. You would never see a gentleman walking outside without his hat on.
The tricorn.
Tricorn, it has no practical value whatsoever. I've heard stories that the back was cocked up from riding in carriages so it didn't knock your hat off. And there is a style of hat that's what it looks like. Why they decided to put these up, I have no idea, because when it rains, it works as a gutter. The water just fills up.
You take it off and water your plants.
And if I'm priming my musket, when I tip my head down, it washes the pin out. And keeping your powder dry is impossible.
I always wondered what all that style came into being.
But when you're indoors, or as a tradesman, you would wear a tradesman's cap, something similar to this. And again, it was because their ideas of hygiene were very different than ours are now. They thought that the oily skins kept disease away. So they're not washing their hair or their bodies, very regularly at all. So the cap helps keep the aroma down. Just leave it at that. So some of the other, I brought a variety of clothing. I've actually got them stacked backwards, but that's just the way it worked. So we'll just peel the onion and see what happens. So this is a coat you would wear in wintertime. And again, the cuffs are much too large for somebody in their 20s, but for my age it's perfectly appropriate because I've been wearing this coat for 30 years. It's heavy wool. This one is unlined, but it will hide a multitude of sins of modern clothing I may choose to wear underneath it. This is a raincoat. It's waxed cotton. It's your standard coat, shirt rather, pattern, and it just buttons at the neck, and it does a tolerable job of keeping the rain off as long as it's not torrential.
How did they wax it?
Excellent question. In a vat.
Okay, dipped.
So it would be dipped. Yep.
Beeswax or
Sorry?
beeswax or
Beeswax. Yep, beeswax and turpentine, and there's another carrier, I forget, it escapes me at the moment. But they would stitch the garment and then dip the garment. That way all the seams would fill.
Wouldn't that peel and fall off eventually? Or was it not that thick? Oh, I see.
It's impregnated.
Ah.
It's impregnated.
Oh, no, it's actually picked up the
Yep, goes right through the fibers. So you can wear it inside out if need be.
That doesn't feel all that different than they do today.
No.
That's amazing.
So, let's see, how am I gonna do this? So, I'm dressed as a colonial. I've been reenacting since 1974. I started with the Sudbury Minute Company. I still march on the 19th of April with them. We march on the 19th from Sudbury Center to the North Bridge, regardless of the day of the week, regardless of the weather. We've marched on Easter Sunday. They marched on the 19th, so we march on the 19th. That's all there is to it. And so I've been doing that from '74 until about 5 years ago. And a friend of mine had been after me to come to the dark side. Come try the British. I kept saying no. Something happened, and I said, I've always wanted to do Lexington Green, and the only way to do it is you either have to live in Lexington, or not live in, be a member of the Lexington Minute Company, or in red. I'm involved in enough units, I didn't want to get into the politics of the Lexington Minute Company, so I said, you know what, I'll try this in red. I haven't turned back. It has been so much fun to do a lot of the same battles that I've done on the colonial side, but from the crown side, and to see literally from their perspective, politically, militarily, it's been a lot of fun. And a lot of things I've learned. But, so working backwards, this is a coat, an officer's coat, from the 4th Regiment of Foot Light Infantry, who answered the call on or part of the march on the 19th of April. In fact, the 2 British soldiers who were killed outright and buried at the North Bridge in Concord, there's a monument there, were from the 4th Foot Light Company. There's another monument down by the Colonial Inn in Concord Center, there's a stone with a British flag. A third member of the 4th Foot Lights was mortally wounded and he's buried there. This is a sergeant's coat from the 4th Foot. I am currently their commanding sergeant. Didn't want to be, I joined the unit to be a private, which is what this coat is.
Wow, that was a pretty significant coat for a private.
Well, and there's more variation than that. What I want to point out is how dark this red is compared to a little bit brighter for the sergeant's coat,
Right.
and then a little bit brighter still and a much finer weave for the officer's coat. That's typical. That's totally indicative. The wings on the shoulders are a sign of the Light Company and the Grenadiers. The 4th Foot has white tape with a black stripe up the middle. All sergeants in the British Army had plain white tape. They still have the 4 on the button. And they have a whistle for commanding the troops in the field. One blast is do what I told you to do. 2 is stop doing what I told you to do. And 3 is come back to where I am. So you can command guys in the woods without having to see them. And then the officer's kit has the wings as well, but now you start to get into the silver lace, indicative of an officer, and the light companies didn't wear epaulets per se, but they had the fringe on the wings to show them as an officer. Now the other major difference between these two, the regular soldier has, the tails are much longer. For example, this is a French coat. This is from the 85 Regiment Saint-Ange, one of the 5 units that came with Rochambeau in 1779. They cooled their heels for 18 months in Boston and Newport, while Washington and Rochambeau disagreed as to the right course of action. I'm jumping 7 years ahead now. Rochambeau was a professional soldier. He was a major general. He understood the mentality of fighting the British, at least in Europe. Washington wanted to attack Clinton in New York City. Rochambeau recognized the fact Clinton had been dug in there for 4 years. He knew there was no way they were going to unearth Clinton out of New York. His suggestion was to follow Lafayette, who was actually a general under Washington, not under the French, who had pushed Cornwallis and the Southern campaign into Yorktown. Rochambeau, out of frustration, sent a letter to Admiral de Grasse, who was in charge of the fleet in the West Indies, explained the situation. The Admiral totally understood, sent a letter to Washington saying, "My dear sir, I am offering you my 21 ships of the line from now until hurricane season in October, but I will only sail as far north as the Chesapeake Bay." Washington knew he'd been had, but he acquiesced. So the combined forces of French and Americans made a feint on New York City, which just kept the British bottled up in their defenses, and then moved down to Yorktown, where they set up a classic siege, the only time siege lines have ever been set up in North America. First parallel was a success, pushed the British back into Yorktown. Second parallel with the night raids on redoubts 9 and 10. The Americans took 9, the French took 10, and vice versa, I forget which. And that started the construction of the second parallel, at which point Cornwallis had no choice but to surrender his army. I've done it at the bicentennial, and then again at the 225th. And I hope to be around to do it again at the 250th. We'll see how that goes. But, so the point of all that is you can see how long the tails are on this coat.
Yeah.
And this coat is set up to be in battle. If it was a formal occasion, like a ball or something of that idea, then the tails would be let down, which gives it a much more formal look.
Yeah.
And they could do that with the same uniform coat. Still smell the same. that's the significance of those two things.
Is it split so he could ride on the horse's cart?
No, so it doesn't get in your way if you're marching or running. So this is typical of an infantry coat tail length. This is a 1775 uniform of the British Light Infantry, and you can see how much shorter they are. And also the turnbacks that I just unhooked for you on the light coat is stitched down. And the heart, or in this case the fleur-de-lis, is there to provide reinforcement for the hooks and eyes, and it became a fashion carryover to that. So then, as the war progressed and moved further south, people say that the British Army couldn't adapt. Couldn't be farther from the truth. What they realized is this heavy wool and the small coat that goes with it, which is the same heavy wool, was the soldiers were dropping like flies in the New Jersey and Pennsylvania and what have you. So the order came down, cut the sleeves off the greatcoat, use this part of the coat for whatever you need, stitch the sleeves onto your waistcoat, and ditch the waistcoat altogether. So this became the Southern Campaign jacket, or what we from '77 and on, which is great in the summertime. Problem with light infantry is they don't march with baggage train. So the guys in the 4th went the winter of '77, '78 with no tents and just this for their coat.
So they were freezing to
They were much tougher than we are.